Chris Redfield has the same body shape in RE5 as he does in RE1. His default RE5 outfit is nearly a recolor of his default director's cut arrange gear. Even the pose on the cover is his manual pose from the original game, showing off his muscular arms. His facial features then come from his 2002 remake redesign, like his mysterious forehead scar or his outward ears, essentially unifying the two designs. But many didn't like Redfield returning to being beefy. This was probably a combination of the camera being too close in the original versions of RE5, making him take up too much of the screen, and people just being used to the 2002 redesign, especially if they spent more time with that remake over the original game. I liked Chris returning to his original body shape because it not only created contrast between him and Leon, but Chris Redfield's thick silhouette was always his most defining physical characteristic to me in RE1, and I don't seem to be alone, as that body shape was not in his concept or manual art. It wasn't there when you bought an action figure of Chris because the toy manufacturer were likely sent the concept art as the blueprint of what the character looked like. And yet when he returned in the DualShock version of RE2, where characters were substantially more detailed than RE1, they took that blueprint of his manual art sporting saturated hair, a Crusoe green flak jacket as opposed to the more El Paso green it was in-game, and they also added the bulk from his RE1 model. They made a new unified design that was both more faithful to the manual art's color scheme, while adding the defining trait of seeing Chris in-game. He also seemed to have this bulk and arms in the scrap scenes of them returning from RE1 and Nemesis, so it seems like the concept art was no longer the sole blueprint of what Chris Redfield looked like. In the 90s games, it was also the muscular body his in-game model ended up having in the final product. But then the early aughts games removed that detail before 2005 saw it return. Now why did it disappear for those 5 years? Were the modelers of Code Veronica in the 2002 remake not privy to the decision? Or was it a compromise of how they approached motion capture and animation? Either way, it recreated the division of the 1996 game. If you were to ask someone what Chris Redfield looked like in the original 1996 RE1, they might give you 4 different answers. His in-game model, the US cover, his manual art, or the live-action actor that was apparently chosen after the in-game model was already finalized for having the closest hair to the character. Which brings up a question I find myself asking across different games. Which of these varying designs is what the character looks like when you have to put them in a sequel? Does Misty from GTA have a beauty mark? Does Lila have green hair or brown? Do you picture Regina to be Asian or Caucasian? Which variation of a character saves in my head as their appearance varies by game? Chris's in-game model is what he looked like to me over his manual art, but Amano's art is what Final Fantasy looks like to me, not sprites. The protagonist's defining horned helmet was only in Amano's art, and not in the actual in-game graphics. The importance of packaging art was to teach you what to fill in on ambiguous graphics. But the standard of in-game graphics is raised to the point that they're quite defined visuals. Resident Evil characters aren't ambiguous 1970s sprites. They have details down to the limbal rings around their irises within their eyes, which can call into question the packaging art's authority over the in-game graphics when they don't match up. People have always ignored cabinet art to paint their own story onto these graphics, but I've always wondered what is the character guide to what some of these characters look like when they have to bring them back for sequels. It always stuck in my head that someone said the painted movie poster for Indiana Jones looks more like the characters than the actors themselves. In their mind, the character of Indiana Jones was a concept of a man whose spirit they felt that painting better depicted than the live-action footage. They're trying to capture the spirit of a character, and I hate that. I hate that photorealistic characters in video games aren't more often held to strict rules of canon facial structure like cartoon mascots are, that they're not taking advantage of the ability to morph polygons into a unique face. Imagine building care for the protagonist of a TV show if every single actor is replaced each season. A great example is people's reaction to Peter Parker and Mary Jane's faces changing in Insomniac's Spider-Man 2. Suddenly having new faces was like being introduced to new characters instead of feeling like the same characters they had the last adventure with. Recasting in live action is a direct hindrance to audiences building a relationship with a character, and there's no reason for polygonal models to suffer from that. Even when they tried making Jordy Dandy the new face of Chris, they pushed it too far and had to make Jordy Dandy look more like Chris Redfield. This could also extend outside of character design to locations, which you could argue are also characters. If I had the opportunity to take you back to your childhood home but redesigned it with new wallpapers, furniture, and details that I think make it look cooler, it takes away from the impact of getting to see a familiar location again. And in video games, it takes away the cool comparison point of seeing the same location depicted across different technological leaps. Though unique to horror, you might want a dash of off. And then you get into the subjectivity of everyone having a different interpretation of a character's energy, and how is that affected across localizations and character developments without it becoming the Ship of Theseus paradox. I didn't like RE5 changing his eye color to brown. The reason Chris Redfield's eye color was relevant in the original trilogy was because it represented his familial connection to Claire. While despite Game Informer's speculation that Sheva was Claire before the game came out, Claire not being part of RE5's story made Chris's eye color an unimportant detail when designing him. But I wish that eye color was part of the strict, rigid rule set of what he looks like the forehead scar. Because that familial connection to Claire even when she's not there is world building in the same way that Leon kept the scar Krauser gave him in RE4 even in games where Krauser's never mentioned. That scar is a monument, memorial, and remembrance of the adventure. In the same way the Redfield's blue eyes are not just reminders of how they were used in relation to the Ashfords and Code Veronica, but are reminders of each other's existences and their shared backstory.
So Claire Redfield listens to Shrinks now.
I'm just asking how my big brother's doing, a jerk.
When Chris and Sheva have this exchange in RE5...
Wouldn't you rather be back in America than a place like this?
Not necessarily. Some people might think America has its own dark side.
That doesn't sound very patriotic.
I'm just a realist. It's a capitalist society. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of constant pressure. Sure, there are opportunities to be had. But at what price? You gain, someone else loses.
You don't sound like any American I've ever met.
That's the great thing about us Americans. We're all different.
Out of context, you can make all kinds of assumptions about this exchange. But within the context that Chris has repeatedly lived as a drifter, the promotional material for RE1 introducing him as an orphan before RE2 added the detail of him having a little sister to raise. His ID cards being more scuffed than the character select because his whole life he's been a disorganized mess, with serving in law enforcement being what gives him an escape to structure and community. It all frames anything you write for the character. Also, Sheva kinda put him on the spot, like what is he supposed to say? Yeah, home continent's way better than yours, new coworker I just met 5 seconds ago and is asking me in front of everyone. But as you keep building those little details game after game after game, it creates your world building for returning consumers satisfaction with to trickle down to new consumers learning of those amassing small details. It fosters community. The axe mark on Jason's mask told the story of his battle with Higgins all the way until he was in outer space. That is a trophy people appreciate, and why you want to avoid inconsistency in even character design. But maybe Chris just wore brown contacts for a while. I'm Mukhtar.